Since I grew up in a very remote, the remotest of valleys in the Bavarian Alps, I did not see films. In fact, I had no idea that cinema existed until I was 11. And by coincidence, a traveling projectionist came to this little schoolhouse. There was one classroom, but for first, second, third, and fourth grade in one classroom. We were 25 or so children and had one teacher. So, and I saw films for the first time, and they were lousy and didn't impress me. So I grew up without all this, but I grew up as well without running water. We had to go to the well with a bucket and bring water into the house. And electricity, much of the time, not always. No telephones, no radio or anything. So it was a very beautiful and pleasant time. I can only say that there was a fairly short period of time, maybe 2 weeks, maybe maximum 3 weeks, where everything somehow revealed itself for me. It was like a moment of, I say it with a necessary caution, and you should touch this term only with a pair of pliers. It was some sort of an illumination. And that was where I knew I had to travel on foot. I knew the world would reveal itself to me by traveling on foot. And shortly after that, I set out and I wanted to go into Albania, which was terra incognita at the time. And I walked along the border. And I knew I had some sort of I say it again with caution, a high duty to be a poet, but poet of cinema, although I had hardly seen any significant films, Tarzan and Dr. Fu Manchu in particular. And I also, at the same time, it was clear it started a dramatic religious phase, and I converted to become a Catholic, which somehow dissipated itself fairly soon, within 2-3 years. No, but it was a serious decision, and it was an educated decision, because I made myself familiar with the dogmatic side of the Catholic Church, the rituals, and of course church hierarchy is a problem anywhere, not only Catholic Church. So, and it was an educated decision, and I read the Bible. Many people who are religious have not read the Bible, or not in full. I'm a storyteller and I'm inventive, and people sometimes think, yeah, he must be like his characters in the movies. Now I'm not. People think I'm this obsessive Teutonic man who is going wild. No, I'm not. My wife even maintains firmly that I'm a fluffy husband. So
clinically sane. Right?
Clinically sane. Yeah. Besides I'm in the whole film industry. When you look at Hollywood, I mean, it's completely crazed, and I see myself as the only one, literally the only one who is clinically sane. Yeah.
Your last movie, you brought in 2.6 million under budget, which, as you said, is unheard of. And I remember Bruce Chatwin, who was on set with you when you were shooting Cobra Verde, called you a monument to sanity. So it's not just your testimony; others have attested to this.
Yes, some observers who can testify to that. And Bruce Chatwin, yeah, he witnessed some wild stuff. We had 800 Amazon warriors in training, which in Ghana, which was a complete nightmare. And these women, these young women, they're very eloquent. I mean, every African, per nature of their culture, is eloquent, because they settle disputes not by ballot. They sit under a tree, the elders sit under a tree until there is a consensus. And it doesn't matter if it takes 2 days, 3 days, 2 weeks. They come to a consensus, unanimous. And this is remarkable, and wherever you are in sub-Sahara Africa, almost everyone you meet is a great orator. And these women were ferocious speakers, and of course they went wild, and they were out of control sometimes. And Chatwin witnessed some of these incidents when they tried to lynch the line producer.
This film was the film that really, I think, made you famous all over the world. And it was...
But it took quite a while. It took many, many years until anyone wanted to see the film.
Which is inconceivable to me.
Oh no, it happened. The film was finished and it was shown at the Caserne des Réalisateurs in Cannes, where it had some attention, but from then it was lost. Nobody wanted to see the film. And in Germany at that time we had some sort of a rating system. It was a panel of a jury which decided whether the film was culturally valuable or even particularly valuable. Totally ridiculous system, but it was helpful because cinemas would get tax reduction if they showed one of those films. So, and they were very, very clement and very benign sort of panel who would toss this at every single film, almost every single film that year got this label valuable or particularly valuable. Out of 62 films or so, only 3 films didn't get it. 2 of them were 2 hardcore pornos, which didn't get it, and the third one was unique because it was Aguirre, and in cases where the panel decided unanimously, in this case 5-0 votes not to grant any sort of label to it, they have to do it in writing, and it's a wonderful document. It says that the film was so unbelievably bad that panel members needed to vomit. In particular, Klaus Kinski's performance was of such deep stupidity and embarrassment that the panel could not help but decide unanimously to deny any sort of evaluation for this film.
So out of 63 films, this was the only one that really made them feel anything.
Apparently, yes.
This is it's incredible to me because when I see this film, it is one of the great epics of the period of time when I've been a film critic.
But the Cannes Film Festival didn't want to accept it. It was shown to the festival president, and he said, I don't take such bad films. So I ended up in a side event, which was a Kazan.
But it is clearly a great film.
Yes, but
I saw it.
Please, Roger, go back to 1972
I'm sure you're right.
and talk to these guys. Just speak to them and make it clear to them. It actually took some 4 years until the tiniest imaginable distributor in France took it for no money at all. They exhibited it in 2 little theaters with 110 and 90 seats, respectively. And all of a sudden it was sold out for 2.5 years. And I saw people in the afternoon lining up in the rain around the entire block. So I was totally stunned. What the hell is going on there? So I'm still puzzled about it. I have made a lot of steps during my life working in cinema, and I've never stood still. I'm not the one who would do Aguirre 2, 3, 4, and 5. And when you look at Bad Lieutenant or My Son, What Have You Done, and try to compare it to earlier films like, I don't know, Kaspar Hauser, yes, you see it's the same person who made it, but of course I haven't stood still. However, Bad Lieutenant is very close to a very early feature film I made, Even Dwarfs Started Small. Absolutely wild film, completely unruly. A few of you have seen it. It's
that movie was something of a response to or attack on revolution, wasn't it? I mean, it was very controversial at the time.
No, not really. It was never intended to be about ridiculing the world revolution, which was at that time on vogue. So the film came out exactly at the time where the student rebellion started, and it was a whole conflagration of young people who wanted to change the world from today till tomorrow. And it was some sort of also a pubescent idea, juvenile, people who thought cinema had only one reason and one purpose, and that was to serve the revolution in Germany, France, and in the Western world, and to replace the democratic order in these countries by socialists, communist communes. So, and I had the feeling this was kind of silly because they all were raving and ranting about liberating the working class. And I asked, has anyone of you ever worked in a factory? No, of course not, but I had worked in a factory. Has anyone of you ever been in Africa and you are speaking about liberating Africa from the yoke of imperialism? And none of them had ever been in Africa, but I was in Africa and almost died in Africa when I was 18. So I had a different horizon, a different biography, different experiences, and hence I was anathema for them.
could have done a documentary about climate change, or at least environmental disaster, and you've done a movie about volcanoes recently.
Yeah.
What was it about this story that made you decide to do it?
Well, I would say it's not the central sort of element in the film that it's about a side of an ecological disaster. In fact, it is a fictitious disaster. Diablo Blanco doesn't exist, but it was based on a short story by a talented young American writer, Tom Bissell, Aral. And Aral, this gigantic lake that dried out, is a man-made disaster in Central Asia.
It is.
And you know quite well about it. But of course, for me, it was also about looking at things from a different angle, like the saint under the tree. All of a sudden, the saint stretches out and morphs into a landscape, into the Strait of Messina, and all sorts of things that have been spinning in my mind. And of course, two blind boys being exposed with a leading character in the film. So I just wanted to make the film very badly, and that's how we did it. We had very, very short time to do it, only 16 days of filming. That's very, very little. I mean, I've never had such a condensed sort of time for shooting.
Isn't it?
I mean, since you mentioned young filmmakers, you're not a great fan of film schools.
No, although I run my own film school, the Rogue Film School, but it's some sort of against what you normally see worldwide in film schools. Very disappointing, very dull what's going on there. So it's more the real guerrilla style sort of stuff, and very intense. And the film school doesn't have a place, nor does it have a specific time. I could hold my film school, for example, in Hyde Park over a long weekend, 3-4 days, or in an abandoned quarry in Yorkshire somewhere. I could do it, and I would determine once I know 5-6 months ahead of time, I'm not under contract, I'm not filming at that moment, let's say beginning of March next year, I'm certainly going to be free. I could hold one of those sessions of the Rogue Film School. And of course, it's not for the faint-hearted. And since I have announced I would, the only thing I really teach is how to pick locks and how to forge documents, forge shooting permit, for example, for which I used when I did Fitzcarraldo. I couldn't have made the film without massive forgery because I was not allowed to move my ship up a river. There were military camps springing up one after the other, and nobody knew what was happening. So I brought a massively forged, beautiful shooting permit. What we did not know was that a border war would break out soon between Peru and Ecuador. And I had built a camp, and it was for over 1,000 people, and it was attacked and burned to the ground, so I had to start all over again somewhere else, 2,000 kilometers further to the south
That was doable.
of Peru.
That was doable.
It had to be done, yes, and it was doable. But of course, you have to face other problems, and there was some of them were serious. We had 2 plane crashes, or we had I lost my leading actor out of the film Jason Robards, and his sidekick Mick Jagger. He's the singer from the Rolling Stones. Yeah, you know him, I'm sure. and on and on and on. So there were real problems there, catastrophes of great consequence, of course. So they had shot half the film and had started to begin all over again from the beginning.
he's a very complicated character, Timothy Treadwell. I think that's a slight understatement, but he's a very complicated character because on the one hand, he spent 13 summers, I think, wasn't it, with these bears in Alaska. Extraordinary video footage of them. Clearly a degree of courage, but would also report on it as if he was in a reality television show with a kind of curious...
Or maybe even worse, in a Disney movie.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, as if bears were fluffy creatures you could approach. He actually does it in the film. He reaches, you see his hand reaching out and touching the face of a bear, and he would sing a song to the bear. You just don't do it. You better respect. You see, I differ with him. I do not love the bears. I would rather respect the bears. So of course I had quite difference in opinion, and I voice it. And I think it's kind of legitimate that I do this, because it's not only Timothy Treadwell. There's some sort of a trend in highly technical civilization which does not understand wild nature anymore. And it's what I call the Disneyization of wild nature. And unfortunately, this philosophical sort of deep misunderstanding cost him his life, and also cost the life of his girlfriend, Amy Huguenard, who was with him at the time. And when park rangers were called in, 2 bears had to be shot dead because they started to attack the park rangers as well, and they had to be shot dead. So it was counterproductive what he did. So it's one of those projects where it's not that I started to develop it or so. It just in a way jumped at me.
It had so many, because there's obviously, one of the things that everybody picked up on was the fact that there was an audio recording, of the moment of death of Treadwell and his companion. And so there's a sort of sensationalism that surrounds it as well, was that you were sort of trying to strip away that, but also trying to redress the kind of sentimentalization that surrounds all of it at the same time.
Sure, the sentimentalization, I'm kind of allergic against that, but you're referring to a tape. What happened is, when the bear attacked, it was in both Amy Huguenard and Treadwell, with all probability, were in the tent. Treadwell apparently left the tent in order to confront the bear, and his girlfriend switched on the camera. It must have been so violent that she didn't have time to take the lens cap off the lens and dropped the camera. So the tape ran, but it only recorded the audio. And everybody who was into this production, the TV network and the distributor and the producer, they said to me, you have to address this tape because it was discussed in all the media. Everybody wanted to know what's on the tape. And I said, okay, I'm going to address it, but I will not play it for an audience unless I know what's on it. And this is why I staged, you see me from behind, and I'm listening to the tape, and opposite to me is this young woman, Jewel Palovac, who lived with him once and who is the owner of the tape now. She inherited the tape. And she tries to read from my face what I'm hearing. You see her face, not mine. And she starts to cry. She sees there's something going on inside of me. And I took it off and I said, this is not going to happen. This is not going to be in my film. And I was under pressure and I said, no, I'll walk out of this project. It's not going to be in this film, only over my dead body. So it's not in the film. They had to respect it.
clean up one man. I've got a hunch I'm never going to feel no other kind of.
Sure, of course, I had my own preferences, and he had something like 100 hours of footage. I personally saw only something like 12, 14 hours all in all, because I had to be very fast with editing. And it was kind of odd. The production said to me, I started shooting on my birthday early in September, and I was back from shooting 3 weeks later, around 25th or 22nd of September. And the production people told me, this looks like a film for Sundance, a festival. Do you think you can finish it until Sundance, which is end of January? I said, yeah, I'm always fast, I can do that. And they said, but there's a glitch. And I asked, what is the glitch? Well, the submissions for Sundance end at the beginning of October in 10 days from now. Can you manage to edit the film in 10 days? I said, yeah, let me try. And I finished it in 9 days. It's not completely correct. After that, we still fiddled. We still didn't have the final music. There was only temp music. And because of this pressure of time, I could not watch 100 hours of footage of Treadwell. And I said to everyone, what I've seen so far, 90% are fluffy bear cubs. And so I don't need these. Look out for example, encounters with foxes, because he was completely off guards with foxes. He was not the magnificent warrior who had to defend a 1,100 pounds grizzly behind him against the bad guys.
Clearly needed
with foxes, he was much more personal, and he had friendship with foxes that was genuine in a way. And I would have very clear criteria what to search for. And even though there were intelligent young people who sifted through it, I found things thrown away. There's a wonderful moment. He plays Starsky and Hutch. I've never seen it, but it seems to be detectives or so who are wildly out there. And he jumps in front of the camera and plays some moment of Starsky and Hutch, and then he disappears. And for 15 seconds he's gone, and you see reed grass wafting in the wind, and then he jumps back and appears again. And I only saw how he jumps in front of the camera and how he comes back. And I asked the young man who was sifting through this, I said, isn't there something in between? Yeah, he said, but I deleted it, I left it out. And I said, show me what happens in between, 15 or 20 seconds. And all of a sudden I see something magnificent, an image of such great beauty, where a landscape demands to be shown on a screen. Some sort of an aesthetic that has its own power, that is beyond the person who did the shooting and the person who was editing the film. It had to be in the film. And I reintroduced it into the film, the time in between, which was literally nothing, but it had a great, strange beauty and demanded to be in the film.
This is for you.
If I can't turn around a person who is unwilling, of course, you have to accept it. But sometimes in my films, Into the Abyss, there's the father of one of the two murderers, Delbert Burkett. And he's also incarcerated, and pretty much for life, and he knows it. And he steps in front of the camera, and I ask him very quickly, very painful questions, and he says, you know what, I can't really talk about that. I can't really talk about it. And pause, quiet. And I say, please try it. Pause. Can you try it anyway? And then he starts to, bit by bit, give us the most painful sort of account of his mistakes that he made with his son and how he brought him up. And afterwards, when he left, he said to me, said to me, Mr. Herzog, sir, and I said, I'm not a prison guard, you don't have to say sir, so I'm Werner, this is my name. And he said, Werner, I'm so glad that I said it, that I have it, that I made this statement on camera. It's yours now, it's for people out there. They should know how not to do all these mistakes. I've been fascinated by poets who have gone to the very limits of language. In German language, it would be Hölderlin. Hölderlin, who went to the very borderlines.
You have said that the poet must not avert his eyes.
Well, that's another question. Yes, I think the poet or the filmmaker or the musician, the poet must not avert his eyes. We should not be sitting in the library and study it as an academic subject. I think the poet has to live a real solid, pure, raw life out there in life itself.
This is why I take myself out of the library quite often.
Yes, which is certainly healthy, and Paul, I think you have started to watch WrestleMania on television, which I have advised.
Thanks to you, but I would
because you must not avert your eyes. This is what is coming at us. This is what television, what a collective anonymous body of majority wants to see on television. A majority of people, and I was always fascinated by the Anne Nicole Smith show. I mean, the most vulgar blonde with installations of breasts as far reaching out as this. And only after she died of an overdose of medications, all of a sudden what I had preached, this is important, there's something big going on. And the big thing going on, of course, was the vulgarity on one side, but it was that there was some sort of a new image, a new prototype of so-called beauty out there, a comic strip beauty in utter vulgarity and in complete deformities. And it's very strange how the collective mind creates these kind of fantasies. And we have seen ideals of beauty, of course, in Greek, ancient Greek, in antiquity. We have seen images of beauty in let's say, in early Renaissance time, wonderful Venuses, and very strange and different from antiquity in a way. And today we are seeing the bodybuilding, I mean, this kind of male, quote-unquote, beauty and ideal, which creates bodies that are completely and utterly gross and deformed. And all of a sudden, the deformity itself becomes the chosen ideal. But I keep saying, do not avert your eyes from it.
No, I witness in many important meetings. I witness people who simply do not blink.
Yes.
I mean, they just don't have the ability anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, of course.
And
this is very scary.
It is scary, I behoove them to blink, but they don't.
Yes, and they can't smile, and they can't eat, and they can't.
Or if they smile, it's a very, very troubling smile.
And this is, and it's interesting because I do live in Los Angeles, and at certain events, 60, 70, 80% of the women are surgically redesigned, and they are masks, frozen masks in a frozen rictus. And it's completely strange and for me bizarre, but you do not avert your eyes. That's what's coming at us. Nicolas Cage would not sign his contract unless I was directing the film, and I would not sign my contract unless he was the leading character in the film. So there was an immediate basis. We never had any contact before, but we watched each other's work in a way, and I think we complemented each other very, very well, and Nicolas knew that I would get the very best out of him. I always get the very best out of actors. They're always magnificent, including Kinski, by the way, who did 205 shitty films. But in my films, he's really magnificent. Cage really trusted me, and sometimes, I give you one hint, he said to me on the second day of shooting, Werner, I hate to ask this because I know you cannot stand debating the character development of your figures on screen. You cannot stand these endless debates about motivation. Yes, it's true, I cannot stand it. And he said to me, but one quick question, maybe you have some sort of a quick answer. Why is the bad lieutenant so bad? Is it the drugs? Is it Hurricane Katrina? Is it the corruption of the police force? Is it his messed up family life? And I said to him, don't enumerate anything more, let's stop it right here. And I said to him, Nicolas, there's such a thing like the bliss of evil. Go for it. And he really went for it. So it was a very short, intense understanding about something essential. And from there on, he trusted completely. So, and it's a special way to make establish a trust between actors and director and vice versa.
Oh, wonderful. You didn't have to forge any documents for North Korea, I assume, too.
You shouldn't do that.
Yeah,
that would be no. With North Korea, there's no joking, and you can't do it. And by the way, I completely respected what they asked me to do. I was there for filming a volcano, which is a gigantic volcano at the border, right at the border with China. Half the volcanic lake in the rim is Chinese, the other southern part belongs to North Korea. High military presence, and we were only allowed to do filming related to the volcano. And at one instance, very interesting, we filmed at the rim of the volcano with a scientist, and about 10 yards away from us there were soldiers. Everybody in North Korea should at least once visit the volcano because it's meant the spiritual origin of the Korean spirit and the Korean nation. So soldiers are ferried there and experience the wonder of this place of origin. And I hear some laughter right next to me, and I see there are some young soldiers taking photos. We swung the camera around, and there were 5 or 6 young soldiers and a young female soldier, and they did selfies and took photos of them in front of the volcano, and one of the soldiers had tickled one of the girls.
Oh.
So, and she was laughing, and they were enjoying, and all of a sudden one of our Secret Service guys was bang in front of the camera, demanded switch it off, and now we were forced to delete it. And they said, I tried to argue, and I said, this gives such a human face to the armed forces in your country. No, in no country in the world you can show soldiers with their face recognizable, you can identify them. And besides, the North Korean soldier is not giggling and laughing. He and she are determined to sacrifice their lives for the fatherland. So, and we tried to delete it, and we couldn't. It was complicated data management, and then after 3 days, they wanted to confiscate the entire hard drive, and they said, please don't do that, because we are losing 3-4 days of shooting. And I said, I have a proposal. I would like to give you a guarantee that I'm not going to use this footage. And I said, I function like that. Many of my contracts, the most important, were not in 120 pages contracts, but handshakes, an oral sort of commitment. And they always functioned. And they said, what does your guarantee look like? And I said, I have 3 guarantees: my face, my honor, and my handshake.